The very act of observing reality can change the outcome. This is the fundamental principle behind what physicists discovered with the double slit experiment, that the presence of a conscious observer can change the results of reality. But what does it mean in our practical everyday existence? Does that mean that we go around and we collapse wave functions just by observing certain phenomenon? Perhaps. I remember when I was deep into my quantum jumping, quantum shifting adventures, and I walked into a gas station and went to the bathroom, bought some things. And when I was in there, I shifted and I saw different prices. And the gas station was close enough that it wasn't too perturbing, meaning it wasn't like I felt like I would teleported into an entirely new version, but there were some key subtle differences that I observed that indicated to me that it was a different version. At least that's how my mind conceptualized it. And as I left, there were different prices on the billboard. When you start quantum shifting, these are the things that you look out for because they are KPIs, key performance indicators, a leftover business term. I pulled it into the quantum shifting arena to try to understand what are the objective data points that we can observe as we are reality shifting. If we take the assumption that reality shifting is true, then how far can we stretch it? How far can we go? How much can the mind handle before it breaks? And as I drove off from that gas station, I have a distinct memory burned into my mind where I was looking at the gas station sign, the prices, in my rearview mirror as I was driving off and wondering, as other people were passing me on the interstate, if the act of observing that sign, knowing that I had entered into a gas station with different prices on that very sign, if that somehow changed the experience for the people around me. I don't have the answer to that question. But what's interesting is that later on I would find out that further work in physics had been done to analyze this principle, but in a little bit of a different way, where they had conscious observers sitting in a laboratory intending on changing the results of a random number generator. Some of these random number generators had electromagnetic shielding and other setups to ensure the quality and integrity, including a random or some interval, I don't know if this part was random, but some interval of a reset to make sure that the random number generator would indeed stay random over time if it somehow lost its randomness. It's really interesting. So they then asked a series of people to try, just with the power of their mind, to influence the results of the random number generator. If you know anything about these, they are incredibly random. And you can actually measure with statistics the randomness. And so if there is any change based on somebody using just the power of their mind to influence the output of these numbers, you can quantify it. It's not magic. You can actually do mathematics. And what they found is that, indeed, with the power of a conscious observer's mind, they could influence the random number generator to to generate outputs in 3 different directions: higher than 50, lower than 50, or neutral. And what they found is, statistically speaking, this was repeatable, meaning it didn't just happen once in somebody's laboratory. It happened several times in many people's laboratories. There was, and I just read this article, there was a Freedom of Information Act release by a 3-letter organization in 1989. It's readily available on Google, that actually summarized the results of all of these different studies and did a meta-analysis. And it's not clear to me if this 3-letter organization actually wrote this paper or if they took it from a journal and made notes about it, because there were some handwritten notes on it. So I'm not saying that this was studied by this said 3-letter organization, because I don't have that detail. But what I do know is that there are legitimate studies to indicate that not only does the act of observing reality change reality, but the act of intending to change reality changes reality. The intent to influence, using just the strength of somebody's mind, can change reality. And this is beautiful science. Many of you already know this because you are powerhouse manifestors. So this is your encouragement to keep going. Because where we become weak is when we start to believe that we have no power. We have no influence. We have no control, and reality just happens on a whim, apparently, or somebody else's whim. And when we understand that this is indeed a principle, not only in the metaphysical communities, the spiritual communities, but a scientific principle, we start to understand the power of what consciousness really entails, which is why some of, in my opinion, the most successful people are those that do not give up, that continue to be resilient, that double down in the face of hardship. And I don't mean to be inflexible and stubborn, because adaptable is an important part of, or being adaptable is an important part of being resilient. You want to be flexible, but firmly rooted. And willpower is one of the gifts that we have, because it is strength of mind. And what is strength of mind if not the conviction and intent to mold and to shape and to achieve? And very often this can be a double-edged sword, because it's important to balance the molding and controlling side of ourselves with the receptive and flowing and receiving. And I find that it's a delicate balance, and it's not always clear-cut. Sometimes you need to be fully in flow, and that's very, very important, because you need to be receiving. You need to be malleable. You need to be almost like letting other people shape you, or the environment shape you. And then some situations and time points actually call for a shift in polarity. And then other time points will actually call for an integration of both. So in any given day, you will actually verge like a seesaw between these different states. And so mastery of the full picture of who you are meant to become, I personally believe, is about integration and understanding when a situation or a time point calls for a particular essence of you. So when I say this next part, I don't want to lose sight of that. Your ability to drive is a critical feature to your success. If you are a reality shifter, if you are a manifester, it's like being given a vehicle and you jump in the back seat and you expect it to drive itself. Sure, if you exist in a place where there are self-driving cars and just your sheer presence of being inside the vehicle is enough to drive it, then absolutely. But are you in a place like that? This is a sincere question because personally, a lot of, I won't say a lot, but some of the spiritual teachings that are commonly disseminated in our everyday world seem to indicate that that's enough. That all you have to do is show up, get in the back seat, and everything's done for you. Are you driving the car with energy, alone? Or do you also need direction? Do you need intent? Do you need your hands on the wheel? Do you need skills, motor skills, processing skills? Do you need your eyes on the road? Can you be asleep? Can you drive while you're asleep? These are important manifestation questions. It's not, in my personal experience, always about energy alone, or even about emotional regulation. Sometimes it is about going somewhere, deciding something, saying no, booting people out of your car, figuring out the right gas for your vehicle, finding a map, figuring out where you're going. That's part of the fun, in my personal opinion, but I identify as being a driver. So, of course, I would find that fun. And these are the questions that when we think about our reality creation experience, we need to be asking ourselves and thinking critically about the bigger picture of how everything fits together. And a long time ago, decades ago, scientists did these experiments and they didn't leave the confines or the silos of the physics journals until somebody at this 3-letter organization was looking into it, or perhaps they weren't affiliated with that organization, but at some point that organization became interested in it. That's the point. And they started looking at it and understanding, okay, how does this relate to us in our everyday reality? Not just in the silo of physics. What does this actually mean? Then you pair that with some of the teachings of the Monroe Institute, and you start to understand that our ability to drive reality is infinitely more interesting than, at least when I was a child, thinking that it was. I thought there was only one world. I don't know about you. I don't know when you woke up to there being more than one world. But for me, it was in adulthood. And so I find the prospect very tantalizing, very interesting, especially from the perspective of a former neuroscientist that didn't learn about this in school. We didn't know about this. But somebody in a 3-letter organization did when I was a little kid. Isn't that amazing? People knew about this when I thought that there was only one reality. And I would go on to study the brain in mainstream academia years into the future, where we still didn't know. Isn't that interesting? So when we get to this holistic understanding of what it means to be conscious, interacting in physical systems that we can somehow imbue our influence on just by the sheer power of our minds, this opens up a beautiful understanding that not only is it real and viable, but all you have to do is not only want it so deeply with so much conviction, so much intent. I mean, the people that were working with the random number generators were not emotionally invested. I'm just guessing. I'm not one of them, but when you're participating in a study, you might get paid for it, and you're present, and you're interested, and you're engaged, and you're curious, but you're not invested as though your life or livelihood depends on it, right? So now imagine what you can do with that extra level of willpower. If random people in a random lab can randomly influence a random number generator that they have no emotional connection to, now we're talking. Now the possibilities are much more fruitful if we understand how to drive the car. And because I also believe it's not just willpower alone, that it's also finesse, dodging obstacles, sidestepping pitfalls, making sure that you're making the right choices, breaking your patterns, leveling yourself up so you're doing it differently and you're not just repeating the same outcomes just with different people. And when you start to gamify it a little bit in your mind and see that you're in a choose your own adventure book or in a maze, then it reduces the frustration, because it's almost like this puzzle where you're like, well, that's not working out the way I wanted. Well, okay, time to try something different. And that reduces the emotional attachment to some of the negative experiences and allows them to flow through you a lot faster. Because you're like, okay, option 1, I just ran myself into the wall, ran myself into the ground. Okay, where do I go from here? Okay, option 2, it's looking good. Let's try this for a little bit. Wait a second, option 2 has a nightmare attached to this. No, we're not doing that. Okay, what is option 3? Okay, it's looking promising. Okay. I love being a reality shifter. It is such a delight. And if you would like help with your reality shifting journey, I love what I do and I love helping my clients. So if you feel a call, you'll know I'm looking for a mutual resonance. You'll feel it. It will be undeniable. That's the time to reach out to me at sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. Until then, Good luck driving your car.